Housewives shouldn't splurge, especially when they only work part-time.
My husband flung those words at me as I sat on the sofa when he came home from work. Confused by his sudden outburst, I quickly retorted, "Where did that even come from? When have I ever splurged?"
You do your everyday job that anyone could do, and then just laze around at home, right? Here I am, slaving away from morning to night.
Excuse me? Are you being serious right now?
The food budget is $150, and no using the air conditioning. If you can't save money, we're getting a divorce. Got it?
He declared this with an air of triumph, as if looking down on me. But strangely, I didn't feel sad. The only thing that surged within me was anger towards him. Don't be ridiculous. Do you think you're the only one making our life work? Fine. Let's do it your way then. With a smile, I opened my mouth to respond. Sure, but don't regret it, okay? My name is Brooke, 32 years old. I'm a working wife who has a part-time job at a nearby shopping mall. Marvin and I have been married for about 3 years, past the honeymoon phase. We've become accustomed to living together, and lately we really don't hold back. I guess it shows how comfortable we feel with each other. It must be nice to live without walking on eggshells around each other. I'm jealous. That's what a friend told me. But is it really a good thing? It's true, we've become more comfortable compared to when we first moved in together, able to live more freely. But at the same time, I feel like we've started to care less about each other. This realization hit me after a recent incident. That day, I felt sick from the morning, but still went to work. Despite only being a 4-hour shift, I was spent when I got home and collapsed on the sofa, falling asleep right away.
Hey, what time do you think it is?
I woke up to his yelling, only to see my husband glaring down at me like some angry spirit. I glanced at the clock, and it was past 7:30 p.m. Normally, by this time, I would have finished preparing dinner and be ready to welcome him home from work. But today, that routine was broken. Sorry, I felt terrible this morning, but after getting back from work, I just hit my limit. He glared at me and clicked his tongue in disdain, as if I was the bad guy, and briskly dismissed me.
You barely work a few hours and you have the nerve to act like this? You really have some nerve.
A few hours? It's not about that right now, it's about my health.
I work all day no matter how I feel. You can't even manage the housework? Which is practically nothing.
Wait a minute. It's not like I'm skimping on housework. Today was just an exception.
Excuses, excuses. I'm seriously disappointed. I'm cutting the grocery budget next month. Understand?
No. I was stunned, unable to believe he would say such a thing. I had felt his tone getting harsher lately. But to say something like this? Just because I was sick and slept? Why do I deserve this? I'm not even getting that much for groceries as it is. How am I supposed to manage with less? But arguing would only make him angrier. For now, I just acknowledged what he said and tried not to upset him further. It's been almost 2 months since that incident, and honestly, our marriage seems to be heading in a bad direction. The grocery budget was slashed from $385 to $285 overnight, making our already tight finances even tighter. I had to dip into my savings to cover living expenses, and the anxiety was mounting day by day. I dream of having children and owning a home someday. So one day, I decided to bring it up to him. I want to work more hours, maybe even full-time if I can. When I told him after he returned from work, he grimaced openly. He sighed heavily, pointed at me, and said coldly,
"What? Someone who falls ill and skips chores wants to work more? How are you going to manage the household then?"
"It's not about that. The grocery budget's been cut, and at this rate, we won't even be able to save. I thought about working more for our future."
"What? That's because you can't manage the grocery budget properly. Don't blame me for cutting it, and run away from the fact that it's your fault for neglecting the housework."
"That's not it. It wasn't me skimping on chores. I was sick that time."
Yeah. Nice excuses. Anyway, I won't allow you to work more hours. Just stick to the housework and manage the budget better."
He said this with an air of victory, then grabbed a beer from the fridge and started gulping it down. He's the only one who drinks at home, and yet I have to find a way to include the alcohol in the grocery budget. His utterly unreasonable demands were making me furious. I realized that my love for my husband had disappeared, replaced only by negative feelings. Then, on a particularly hot day with temperatures soaring above 95 degrees, just walking outside made me sweat profusely. After returning from work, I immediately turned on the air conditioning and sipped cold tea while working on the household budget. The expenses were tight with the reduced budget, especially since we bought alcohol. I doubted Marvin would give me extra money, so I decided to supplement the shortfall from my savings. After finishing the budget for the month, it was time to start preparing dinner. I was checking the weather forecast on the TV when I heard the front door open. Huh? As I uttered this, the living room door opened. My husband, who usually doesn't come home this early, appeared in the living room. "Marvin, you're home awfully early today."
"Is it a problem if I come home early?"
"It's not that, but it's only 6 p.m. You usually don't get home until around 8, so dinner isn't ready yet."
"I left work on time today. What an inconsiderate woman."
He grumbled as he tossed his work bag onto the floor and roughly took off his suit, changing into casual clothes before glaring at me.
"Housewives shouldn't splurge, especially when they only work part-time."
He looked at me, sitting on the sofa, as if I were trash. Confused by his sudden outburst, I quickly retorted, "Where did that come from? When have I ever splurged?"
"Like right now? Lounging in this cool room?"
"No, I was just working on the household budget after coming back from work."
"You do a job that anyone could do and then just laze around at home, right? While I work my butt off all day long."
"Are you serious?" His one-sided belittling pushed me to my limit. I glared back at him, but he didn't seem the least bit ashamed as he looked down on me.
"A failure of a wife, like you, needs more discipline. I'm setting rules starting today."
"Rules? What are you even talking about?"
"The food budget is $150, and no using the air conditioning. If you can't save, we're getting a divorce. Got it?"
He declared this triumphantly, looking down on me. Yet, surprisingly, I didn't feel sad. The only thing that surged within me was anger towards him. Don't be ridiculous. Do you think you're the only one making our life work? Fine, let's do it your way then. With a smile, I opened my mouth to respond. Sure, but don't regret it, okay?
Huh? Who do you think you are?
When I decide to do something, I go all out. You'll see. He was momentarily taken aback, but soon returned to his arrogant demeanor. Finally, he dismissively said,
Knock yourself out then.
And started guzzling his beer. The next day, I began to save money in earnest. Of course, I didn't use the air conditioning. Instead, I wrapped ice in a plastic bag, used a towel around my neck, and relied on ice pillows, enduring the heat at home. As for the food budget, realistically, managing $150 was almost impossible. So I decided to cut down on common expenses like bread and soup to stay within the budget, and bought what I wanted to eat separately, eating alone. But of course, Marvin wouldn't stay quiet about it. The moment he saw me eating chicken by myself, he turned red with anger and shouted,
Hey, why are you eating chicken alone?
Why? I bought it with my own money. If you want something, buy it yourself.
What? Since when did you get so high and mighty, being supported by me?
Yes, financially, I've been relying on you. But what about you? At this point, why don't we both handle our own expenses and do our own chores?
What?
He was visibly shaken and struggled to respond, probably because he didn't know how to do housework. Another day, he came home early and started yelling about the house being too hot. Even then, I made it clear to him. Hot? But that can't be helped, right? You said no air conditioning.
That's for when you're alone. Why do I have to suffer in this heat?
Then why don't you put an air conditioner in your own room? I've already removed the batteries from the remote because you banned it.
What? Then at least give me an ice pillow.
Oh, sorry. I only have the one I bought, so if you need one, buy it yourself.
This is ridiculous.
Even at night, it was sweltering. His casual words had backfired on him. But thanks to this, my savings steadily increased. Not having to supplement the food budget from my savings was the biggest relief, along with a significant reduction in utility bills. With more money in my savings, I made a decision to divorce Marvin. I realized over these months that there was a reason he couldn't give me more for living expenses. He was spending it on his favorite mobile game. I found a card statement in the trash, showing hundreds of dollars in gaming charges. The spending increased each month, likely using the money saved from the food budget. The most recent statement showed charges over $2,000. Seeing that, my already cold feelings turned to ice. $2,000 for a game? While making me suffer and struggle with the budget? Ridiculous. I can't be with this man any longer. Deciding to divorce him, I spoke to my workplace about becoming a full-time employee. Recognizing my work, they immediately agreed to employ me full-time. Starting next month, I'd be working as a full staff member, and I began looking for a new place to live. I found an apartment and prepared to move, making sure Marvin didn't find out. That evening, a sweaty Marvin came home, complaining as usual. I presented him with the divorce papers and calmly said, "Can you sign this?"
Huh? What? What is this?
Can't you see? It's a divorce agreement.
Divorce? What are you suddenly talking about? We weren't even discussing divorce.
I just think it's impossible to continue. That's why I'm saying this. You don't really think you have no idea why, do you? His face turned pale, and his smug smile twisted. He stared at the divorce agreement I had handed him, and then shoved it back at me. Breathing heavily, he desperately pleaded.
Wait a minute. This has to be a bad joke, right?
A joke? You think I'd say something like this as a joke?
But this is crazy. Why divorce? And you'll be in trouble if we divorce. You can't live on your own. You'll struggle without my money.
Thinking that bringing up money would make me back down? He had no idea how much I had prepared for this day. He forced me to save excessively and spent that money on his entertainment. There were many reasons why I considered divorce, but the most unforgivable was that he saw me not as family, but merely as a convenient housekeeper. He was probably afraid of how his life would be disrupted without me, especially since he couldn't do any housework and had apparently been estranged from his parents due to past troubles. Frankly, he had no one else to rely on but me. But I no longer cared. I had no intention of going back to him. I stared at him, seething, and vented my pent-up frustration. Forcing me to save while you splurge on gaming? How much more do you need to mock me? You might have been happy cutting down the money you give to the house. But did you know I was using my savings to make ends meet?
I get it. I'll start contributing more to the grocery budget again.
It's too late for that. Just so you know, I have no intention of working or doing chores for you anymore. Not even a millimeter. Living alone is far better than taking care of a jerk like you.
What? How am I supposed to live on my own? Think it over, please?
Shut up. A domineering husband like you is unbearably annoying. You might as well writhe in agony living alone. With that outburst, Marvin collapsed on the spot, mouth agape. He didn't say anything more, finally realizing his situation. Later, we got divorced. Perhaps realizing that rebuilding our relationship was impossible, he readily signed the divorce papers and agreed to the divorce. Without me, his financial burdens increased, and he had to manage everything on his own. He reportedly made several mistakes at work and lost any chance of promotion. Now he just shuttles between home and work, barely making ends meet. As for me, I started living alone and began my job as a full-time employee. Working full-time again after so long was challenging at first, but I'm finally settling in. Most importantly, starting this life gave me confidence that I could survive on my own. That alone gives me the strength to keep going. All right, let's give it my all today. I'll treat myself to something delicious this weekend. Finding joy in everyday life and using it as motivation to keep going, I now find happiness in these ordinary days.